Hello, reporter room investigators. Come on in. Come on in. We have a lot to talk about in the Bryan Kohberger case. Today, we're going to be talking about the real reason that the defense team isn't testing the unknown male DNA and the glove found at the crime scene. Will the trial be delayed? And will this help or hurt Bryan Kohberger? New witnesses, the next hearing, because we have a hearing this month, the alternative perpetrator, Brent Kopacka, and was Bryan Kohberger framed? And also, we're going to talk about Dylan Mortensen and Bryan Kohberger's alibi. So let's get started. Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty. I am going to be talking about this case in terms of Bryan Kohberger because he's the only one who's been indicted and is standing trial. So he is innocent, but this isn't a courtroom. I'm not a judge. You're not a judge. So we are going to be talking about this case in terms of Bryan Kohberger. So my name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you have not subscribed to Reporter Room, oh my gosh, it's free. So please. I can't get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. Like, share, leave a comment, and please give this a thumbs up. It lets YouTube know that I'm doing a G-rated show and that I'm doing a good job. So let's go ahead and get started. Come on in and tell me where you are from. You feel free to share what you want. You can share what state, what country, what continent, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but please tell me where you hail from. And also, let's go ahead and start talking about this. So we're going to start with the unknown male DNA, and then we're going to talk about the glove found at the crime scene. Will the trial be delayed? Brent Kopacka, new witnesses, the alternative perpetrator, and Dylan. So and also Bryan Kohberger's alibi. So let's start off with the unknown male DNA. So we know from that the defense team has a private investigator, and we know this because they tried to compel Bethany Funk to testify as to the man that she reportedly saw dropping something into a bag on his way out the door. So we do know that the defense team has an investigator. So a lot of people have been asking me, why doesn't the defense team go ahead and test the DNA that was found on the handrail and on the gloves outside themselves? And I think, this is such a great question. This is why I love reading your comments. In my opinion, this is, they probably, and I'm talking about Ann Taylor here, do know that the blood found on the handrail. Now, the handrail, it was found on the handrail. We're going to talk about the glove next, and we're going to talk about Brent Kopacka, but it was found on the handrail between the first floor and the second floor because this home was 3 stories tall. So I think that the defense team knew enough to know that it was male DNA. I also believe that this blood was degraded, unlike the other evidence that was found at the crime scene. But I believe that the testing was not done. And we know some testing was done because we know it's male DNA, right? So I think that the defense really believed that they were going to exonerate Bryan Kohberger. Why won't they just simply test it? We know she has a private investigator. And a lot of people say, oh, well, she, doesn't have the obligation to do that. No, but she was given a responsibility by the judge if she wants to enter an alternative suspect, and we know they're having a hearing about that in just a few days. If she wanted to, enter that, he said she needed to find evidence. So again, why, if the defense team really believed that this DNA on that handrail leading up from the first floor to the second floor exonerated Bryan Kohberger, wouldn't Ann Taylor be testing it? And I think that, and we're going to talk about the glove in a second, but I don't think they're testing the DNA because they're better off with the jury of having it be an unknown. And hear me out on this. I think that they actually identified, I'm talking about the defense team here, whose blood was on the handrail between the first floor and the second floor, that this person would probably be able to provide an alibi as to where they were. So from a defense attorney's point of view, it's better simply to leave it as an unknown and hope it creates reasonable doubt with the jury. Ann Taylor is very smart. And so I think this is why they haven't tested it. We also know that there were security cameras in and around the 1122 King Road residence. And again, if they tested the DNA and that person didn't show up around the crime scene on November 13th of 2022, that would be a problem that the prosecution could poke holes in. So in my opinion, it's better for the defense teams to simply claim that the unknown DNA was not tested and not test it themselves. And then that person, where that person could, find themselves an alibi. And this way they can create some reasonable doubt with this. So let's talk about the glove next. And then we're going to talk about whether the trial is going to be delayed. New witnesses, Bryan Kohberger, the alternative perpetrator, was Bryan Kohberger framed, and his alibi, and then did Dylan Mortensen go upstairs or not, in just a moment. So please stay with me. So let's talk about the glove. The glove is even shakier, in my opinion, than the blood found on the handrail between the first floor and the second floor. It wasn't found until nearly a month after the crimes were committed. Now, over 3 weeks, so somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks, a retired police officer named Chris McDonough, who has a YouTube channel here on this platform, did find it, and the glove could have been dropped at that point by anyone, in my opinion. And Ann Taylor doesn't want to test the glove either, because that DNA could trace right back to law enforcement or a CSI worker, or just somebody who came by to pay their respects to the victims. And so in my opinion, she's better off just letting the reasonable doubt stand regarding the DNA on the glove. So I don't think she's going to, I don't know if she's even going to try to present the glove. And I want to share with you why I think she is going to bring in the blood found on the handrail from between the first floor and the second floor, but I don't think she's going to actually try to present the glove, just because I think that law enforcement would have photographs of that crime scene that they would have taken, and the glove would either be in the photographs or not in the photographs. And in my opinion, it's probably not there. But I do think that the unknown male DNA is going to be an important part of Ann Taylor's defense, and it's going to be an important part of her working to create reasonable doubt with the jury. Remember, Ann Taylor only needs one juror. So if the unknown male DNA doesn't come back as the man or that doesn't come back as the person, like, that purchased a K-bar knife, that purchased a knife sheath in the spring of 2022, if the unknown male DNA doesn't have an owner who drives a white Hyundai Elantra missing a front license plate, and if the unknown male DNA person didn't order a balaclava mask and doesn't have bushy eyebrows and is standing taller than 5'10", then in my opinion, Ann Taylor may not have a viable suspect. So some people have stated that it's not the defense's job to investigate the crimes, and you're right, it's the prosecution's job. They have to present enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond any doubt, but a reasonable doubt. But I think that because the judge told her that to present an alternative suspect, Ann Taylor would need to present evidence that the judge is expecting her to do this. So let's talk about whether or not the trial will be delayed. And then we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger, new witnesses. The next hearing, was Bryan Kohberger framed, Bryan Kohberger's alibi, and then did Dylan go upstairs or not? So the defense delay, I believe that this trial is going to start on time. And I want to show you why. Let me take this down and put this up. Okay, so we do have some witnesses that were subpoenaed. These are 5 individuals, including his former professor at DeSales University and a woman who works at a boxing gym where he used to train. And they were hit with a summons connected to the trial. So I don't think this is going to be delayed, because I don't think all of the jury questionnaires would have gone out and that these summons would go out if the judge was planning to delay this trial. Let me know if you have a different opinion, and let's do a poll. If you think that this trial is going to be delayed by more than a couple of days, put a 1 in the chat. If you think this trial is not going to be delayed, put a 2 in the chat. So while you guys do that, I'm going to finish talking about this. So and then we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger. The names on the list are DeSales University professor Michelle Bolger, who taught Bryan Kohberger his criminal justice master's degree program. She had previously revealed her shock at hearing what BK was accused of dealing. She told Daily Mail, which is my source on this, in the days after his arrest that she was shocked as the SH word. She said, I'm shocked and he's been accused of, I don't believe it, but I get it. She said, he's a brilliant student, she said at the time. Now, the other summons included Ann Parham, who was an advisor at Kohberger School, and Jesse Harris, who worked at a boxing gym where Bryan Kohberger used to work out. Now, I think, and this is Professor Michelle Bulger right here, I think that this is the defense making these subpoenas. I think these is for the mitigation portion. In the event that he is found guilty, I think these people will testify. In my opinion, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But the other two people that were summoned were Ralph Vecchio and Maggie Sanders, and they have also been summoned. Now, it's not clear from the court documents what the purpose of their trial testimony would be, or whether they're being sought as witnesses by the defense or the prosecution. I think it is the defense team. But this list was sealed, keeping it shrouded. This was and the reason I think that this was the defense team is because it did come just days after BK's team filed an amended mitigation witness list in the court in Idaho. So I think that these would have gone out. We already know that Bryan's mother and father and two sisters have all been subpoenaed to testify as well. So let's go ahead and I want to keep moving because we have a lot to unpack today. Let's put this back up for a second. Okay. So we're going to be talking about new witnesses, which we just did. We're going to talk about the next hearing and the alternative perpetrator. So let's, and then we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's alibi. Did Dylan go upstairs or not? So let's talk about the next hearing. So the next hearing is coming up just a few days. It's coming up in just a few days. Now, a portion of the hearing is going to be closed. What I am trying to find out right now is if we're going to be able to see any of the hearing. Now, Bryan Kohberger's attorneys are going to be giving evidence to the judge of possible alternative perpetrators. I do not think we're going to be allowed to watch this because I think the judge is going to want to see whatever evidence Ann Taylor has. Now, Ann Taylor filed this information that the judge requested. You'll recall at the last hearing, he told her there wasn't enough evidence for her to introduce the alternative perpetrator. So I think she immediately presented what her evidence is and then sealed it. I think if it was good evidence, I don't think she would have filed a motion to seal it. Because remember, the judge said it doesn't all have to be sealed, but it was granted and it is sealed. But I don't think the judge is going to grant Ann Taylor's postponement of a actual trial. I don't think she's going to get that delay, part of because she took on a whole nother capital punishment case. And I think it's just, the judge is going to see this for what it is, just another delay tactic. And I just don't think that unless the defense can prove the prosecution leaked this to Dateline NBC, and I don't know if they're going to be able to prove this, I don't think the judge is going to delay the trial because there's always going to be another book. There's always going to be another special, and it's only going to get worse with the leaking as we get closer, to the trial. Or if there's a delay and we don't have a trial, then there's more incentive and more opportunities for people to leak. So I don't think it's going to get better for Bryan Kohberger. I think it will only get worse. And with every delay, all of the delays have been at the request of Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger's defense team. And with every delay, I think there will be more leaking. So let's talk about the alternative perpetrator, and then we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger. Let me grab a sip of water. And we're going to talk about Dylan too. So Bryan Kohberger's lawyers claim to have an alternative suspect. A lot of people have wondered if it is Bryan Kohberger. Okay. So a lot of people have come forward. Oh, let me check in with the poll too. Let me do that real quick. Okay. See where we are. I'm looking for ones and twos. There we go. I was like, I don't see any. Okay, here we go. We got twos and ones. Thank you so much for joining me today, you guys. Hi, Brother Mike. This is our head mod, Brother Mike. Our other head mod and Jazz are both here. And Christy's modding today. Thank you for modding today, Christy. Brother Mike put a 2. Christy put a 2. Jet Set put a 2. Beth, 2. 2. A 1 from JM. 2 from Shady Sadie. Lisa put a 2. Haiku put a 2. Samantha put a 2. Kathy put a 1. So we're voting on whether we think it's going to be delayed or not. And it seems like most of you guys do not believe it's going to be delayed. Christian says the jury will not be swayed by these diversion tactics. Thank you for sharing that. Leave No Trace put a 2 and Jazz put a 2. Brenda 2. Afro or Troll 2. Judge not playing games. Yeah, he's definitely serious. Hi, Natty Shack. Hi, Amy. Hi, Per Anderson. Lori's here. Keep that train on the tracks. Hip. And we call the Judge Hip here just because he does sound, if to the algorithm, like a 1938 to 1945 dictator. Bob put a 2. Thanks for modding today, DM. 2 from Mary Ann and 2 from Florence. All right, so I'm seeing mostly 2s. Hi, Cookie. Las Vegas Girl put 2. Dion says, can she present stuff causing a doubt, but she has to lie because he's guilty? And Jet Set says, I don't think the professor ever met him in person because yeah, you're right. She did not meet him in person. She only knew him online. Veronica thinks it's 2, and Christina thinks it's a 2. Hey, Natalie, I'm new to the chat, but happy to be here. Well, I'm glad you're here too. Well, come on up and talk to me. Donna thinks he did it, and DM thinks yes, but it falls under attorney-client privilege. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for sharing your thoughts on that, and for all the awesome mods. Thank you so much for modding today. Really appreciate your being here. Brother Mike's asking, please help in chat. Welcome others and remind everybody to give a thumbs up. Yeah, we definitely want to keep it classy in the chat. All right, so let's talk about Bryan Kohberger, the alternative suspect. So Bryan Kohberger's attorneys have claimed an alternative suspect that they really could have committed the crimes. And as it stands, the identity of the suspect or suspects and what evidence that could tie them to the crimes remains a mystery. And the filings were sealed at the request of Ann Taylor and the defense team. Now, based on comments from Bryan Kohberger's attorney, the alternative suspect appears to be somebody who cropped up during the initial law enforcement investigation. We know they were working from the inside out. So a lot of people have speculated, is it Bryan Kohberger? And I've had a lot of people asking me, well, what about Bryan Kohberger? So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger. So Ann Taylor told the court that she found a lead on a suspect buried amongst a trove of tips collected by the police, but the judge told her he needed actual evidence. Now, Ann Taylor also previously revealed the defense plans to argue that Bryan Kohberger was framed by somebody by planting his DNA at the crime scene, and that 2 people must have committed the crime. So it's making me wonder if whatever Dylan saw in the other hand, if he was carrying maybe a knife and maybe something else. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what she saw in the other hand, but in my opinion, I think Ann Taylor, if she had something really viable, I don't think she would have filed the motion to seal it. And I have to tell you on a personal note, I've lost a lot of confidence in Ann Taylor. I have to just say, I had a lot of respect for her going into this, but when I saw her beginning to traffic in conspiracy theories and willing to impugn the integrity of another person as an alternative suspect, I have to say I did lose some faith in her. I'm just concerned that she's willing to win at any cost. I hope I'm wrong. But when the judge had to remind her that she was an officer of the court, I just thought, oh no. I know this is a career-making case. I know she wants to win, but does she want to win at the expense of the public and their safety also? So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger, and then we're going to talk about whether or not Bryan Kohberger was framed, Bryan Kohberger's alibi, and did Dylan go upstairs or not, in just a few moments. So please stay with me. So Bryan Kohberger. This is Bryan Kohberger. You can see him here on your screen. He is in his Army uniform, and he was done away with during a SWAT. So let me tell you a little bit about Brent. So he was a 36-year-old Purple Heart recipient. Let that sink in. This man was a Purple Heart recipient. He served in the Army from 2005 to 2009 in the 2nd Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. And he honorably served the United States of America. And he was injured in Afghanistan when he suffered a debilitating traumatic brain injury. So, like many of our veterans, not only did he have a traumatic brain injury, but like many of our veterans, he suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome. So I looked into and investigated Bryan Kohberger before Bryan Kohberger was arrested. And even right when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, because we were wondering, did he have help? And I could not find any connections between Bryan Kohberger and Bryan Kohberger and the victims. I imagine the loved ones of a Purple Heart recipient who's been swatted, who had, mental health issues, but to suddenly be dragged into this. But I couldn't find any credibly sourced information that links Bryan Kohberger to Bryan Kohberger, other than the fact that Bryan Kohberger and Bryan Kohberger both worked at WSU, but not in the same department. And there's no evidence that they knew each other. Now, in the latest comments I'm getting is that some family members of Bryan Kohberger owned a Hyundai Elantra, and it was silver. So now the Hyundai Elantra isn't green. This week and last week, it's now a silver Hyundai Elantra because, as one of my channel members, Regina, pointed out, the Hyundai Elantra doesn't come in green. So now it's been changed, so that the conspiracy theorists can continue to traffic in their conspiracy theories. But, now a family member of Bryan Kohberger has a light-colored Hyundai Elantra. Again, there's no evidence that Bryan Kohberger had this car in his possession. If law enforcement wanted to set up a patsy to take the fall, then Bryan Kohberger would have been the easiest patsy to pick, right? He's gone and cannot defend himself. However, I believe that law enforcement wanted to actually get the person that did this, which is why Bryan Kohberger is under arrest, because I think that they're concerned, for the safety of the public. And, I do think it's worth noting that just ever since Bryan Kohberger has been arrested, nobody else has committed a crime like this, right? Now, as I pointed out to my channel members that said that the Hyundai Elantra didn't come in green, and, it's really been kind of frustrating to see people going after the roommates and going after Bryan Kohberger, but the same people saying that Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty, and he is. But these people haven't been charged with anything, and it seems like they're guilty until they're proven innocent. And I just am wondering, where is the grace for Bryan Kohberger and his loved ones? Where is the grace for Dylan and Bethany and their loved ones? And what happened to the tunnels under the house? I had people in my comment section yelling at me a year ago in all caps. I was a liar. I wasn't telling you guys the truth because I wouldn't platform WSU Kim, because I didn't believe she could provide any credible information that she was that she was actually related. I'm not saying she is or she isn't. I just couldn't find anything that actually linked her to this crime. And then, I was told that a perpetrator snuck in and they got in under the tunnels under the house, and it wasn't Bryan Kohberger. He was framed. And then the house got torn down, and then that theory suddenly evaporated. I didn't share that either. So now that Bryan Kohberger is under arrest, everybody is claiming that somehow Bryan Kohberger is involved. And I think Brent would have made the easier patsy. But again, there's no evidence tying him to the house. And if you're interested in credibly sourced information, then you're in the right place. This is a critical thinkers channel for people who like to have all of the information to make up their own mind. But I even had somebody come into my comment section last week asking me if I'm being controlled by a type of secret government agency that's forcing me to report on this the way I'm reporting on this. And I guess my question is, why would they frame Bryan Kohberger? So let's talk about whether or not Bryan Kohberger was framed. And then we're going to discuss Bryan Kohberger's alibi. Did Dylan go upstairs or not in just a moment? So please stay with me. So was Bryan Kohberger framed by a corrupt law enforcement? This is something I get a lot in the comment section. So my question goes back to, How would you get multiple law enforcement agencies to collude? So we have to have the FBI, the Idaho State Police, the Moscow Police Department, the Pullman Police Department, the WSU Campus Police, the labs who tested the DNA and tested the evidence, and all the CSI workers that collected, images and footprints and image, and the coroner. Everybody would have to conspire together to frame some unknown guy. It doesn't make any sense. So let's go through this step by step on how. So I have some questions back for those of you who believe that Bryan Kohberger is innocent and shouldn't even be indicted and that he's being framed. I just have some questions that I would like to ask you in return. One, how did law enforcement know that Bryan Kohberger had purchased a knife back in March of 2022, a K-bar knife and a knife sheath and a knife sharpener that just happened to match the knife sheath left underneath and to the side of Maddie? Also, where is his K-bar knife and knife sheath now? We saw the search warrants being served and none of them were there. Number two, how did law enforcement get Bryan Kohberger's DNA to match the DNA under the knife sheath? Again, if they were going to just plant Bryan Kohberger's DNA, why not smear it all over the crime scene? Make it look good. Put it on a couple of doorways. Why is it just on the snap of that knife sheath? My question number three, how did law enforcement get Bryan Kohberger to browse for another knife and another knife sheath after the crimes were committed? I mean, he put one in his cart, according to Dateline. So how did they get him to do that? Number four, how did law enforcement know that Bryan Kohberger would be out stargazing on that night, November 12th, into the wee hours of November 13th in 2022, on a foggy night with ice fog and clouds? How did they know he would be out stargazing and wouldn't have an alibi? Five, how did law enforcement get Dylan to identify a man who was 5'10" or taller, who is white, who was athletic but not muscular, with bushy eyebrows? How did they get Dylan to share the information on a suspect that exactly matches Bryan Kohberger? And if they were just going to manufacture, this evidence against Bryan Kohberger and get Dylan to be in on this, right? Why not have her pick him out exactly from a lineup? She didn't do this. She didn't pick him out of a lineup. She just described who she saw. She said she couldn't pick him out of a lineup. So why this general description? If you're going to frame somebody, why not make it look good? Why not have Dylan pick him out of a lineup if it's just all a big conspiracy? Number six, how did law enforcement get Dylan to draw a picture of a balaclava mask which matches the one that Bryan Kohberger purchased? How did they get her? Number seven, how did law enforcement know that Bryan Kohberger would turn off his cell phone at the exact time of the crimes, leaving him without an alibi? I mean, how did they know his phone would just be switched off right at the time of that the crimes are being committed, with a 90% plus charge on it too? Number eight, excuse me. Sorry, you guys. How did law enforcement know to get a green Hyundai Elantra, if you believe it was a green or silver, to actually circle the house so that they could then come, that also didn't have a front license plate, when the Hyundai Elantra doesn't even come in green? How did they find a Hyundai Elantra to just circle the house to help frame Bryan Kohberger? Number nine, these are questions I want to have answered for the people who think this is all a setup. How did law enforcement know to get a Hyundai Elantra that didn't have a front license plate to circle the crime scene multiple times? And if law enforcement was planning to frame Bryan Kohberger, then why put out initially that the Hyundai Elantra was a 2011 to 2013, only to have to correct it a few days later to up to 2016? Wouldn't they know the exact make and model of the car if they were framing him? Why put it out with an error if it was just all a frame job? Another question that I have, number 10, how did law enforcement entice Bryan Kohberger to tend and befriend his WSU colleague, this female colleague that he shared an office with, and use her cameras to spy on her. How did they get him to do that? And why don't I hear about this in my comment section anymore? I got called a liar when I reported on this over a year ago. Number 12, if law enforcement was framing Bryan Kohberger, how come they have trouble getting his AT&T cell phone records when they identified him as a suspect on December 19th of 2022? Why wouldn't law enforcement just have these cell phone records manufactured ahead of time, or make sure they identified him within the 7-day window where they could get their hands on the AT&T cell phone record? Number 13, how would all of these different branches of law enforcement be corrupt, including the FBI, the Idaho State Police, the Moscow Police Department, the Pullman Police Department, the WSU, and we're going to talk about Dylan in just a second, campus police? How would all of these law enforcement people and all of the CSI be able to keep this type of conspiracy a secret for this long? And remember that the roommates have to be in on it too, right? Number 14, how did law enforcement get BK's cell phone to ping in the area of the 1122 house, mostly between the hours of after 10 p.m. and before 4 a.m. in the morning, when all the shops and stores were closed except for one grocery store? How did they get him to ping in that area ahead of time? Number 15, how did law enforcement get Bryan Kohberger to follow Kaylee and Maddie on Instagram? And I showed you guys the Shadow Dragon information on that. Number 16, how did law enforcement entice Bryan Kohberger to return to the crime scene after 9 a.m. on November 13th of 2022? How did they get him to come back after 9 a.m. that morning? Number 17, how did they get Bryan Kohberger to download pictures of the victim's friends onto his phone and images on his cell phone? And finally, number 18, if this is supposed to be some big cartel cover-up, then why not plant medication at the crime scene? Why not plant evidence to make it look like that? Because if I saw evidence like that, I would bring it to you. In the Alex Murdaugh case, I did bring you evidence of secret islands and airstrip. There was a lot of talk about trafficking going on around the Alex Murdaugh case. So this is my opinion in short, and we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's alibi and Dylan Mortensen in just a second. But in short, if law enforcement wanted to frame Bryan Kohberger, they sure did a terrible job. I think they could do a way better job than this if they just wanted to frame someone. They could have smeared his DNA around the crime scene a little more. They could have planted DNA from the victims at his home, right? They could have put it in his Pullman apartment, put it in his car. They could have smeared it around the crime scene a little bit. They could have brought it to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and planted the victim's DNA in the Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. They could have had someone anonymously eyewitness tip off that Bryan Kohberger was at the crime scene and pulled that phone data, right within the first 7 days, not wait until December 19th to identify him as a suspect. And I think if they would have had just been able to, frame Bryan Kohberger, would they have gone through the whole IgG DNA process that they had to go through to get probable cause to actually arrest him and get a court order to take his cheek swab DNA? What do you guys think? I don't know. We're going to talk about his alibi next, but I just think that there's a lot of things that have to happen for Bryan Kohberger to be the one who was framed, who was framed to do this. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Let me see where we're at with comments. Come on up. If you're watching, come on up and talk to me and tell me where you're from. Duckman says 9/8/12 a.m. He's at the Washington Trust ATM on camera north of the house. He was never at the house. Well, we'll see. We'll see what the prosecution says. Thank you, Jody, for modding today. It just says only facts here, no conspiracy theories. Open Mind thinks they are corrupt. Jet said, I love the way your way of thinking, all common sense and facts. Macro says, I just think Bryan is conniving enough to do almost anything to set up a crime. Masters in criminology must have learned something. And Natalie says, I'm definitely not part of the fan club, but I'm mad at myself for not even researching it, if it came in that color. Brother Mike says, only the facts. Marco says, the fur are made up. Let's not use name calling. I know people do that. We have like pro burgers, bushy eyebrow burgers, and we have the guilters. Let's not do that because it depersonalizes and dehumanizes us. And I want, everybody's a person, even if they don't agree. You're welcome to share your thoughts and opinions on this. Just please do it in a polite way. They're just going to say it's all made up and fabricated. Yeah, please don't use all caps in chat. Thank you so much to all of our mods. Julian said, agree, open mind, corrupt, and incompetent. Christine says, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. It's free. Yeah, I can't get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. Betsy says, to them, every case is a cover-up and a frame job. Yeah, I know. Not everything is a conspiracy. Duckman said, did you listen to Andrew Garrett? All the pings are garbage. I did not hear him say that. Las Vegas, let's see. Julian says, my brother is a investigator. He does crimes like this. I'm just watching my words. And I completely agree that the Moscow Police Department is incompetent. Well, okay, let's say you're right. Let's say they're incompetent. But they brought in right away the Idaho State Police and the FBI. So are they also incompetent? Is the Pullman Police Department also incompetent? Is everybody incompetent? Does everything have to be a conspiracy? Amber says Ann Taylor is just milking this case out because she's getting paid twice her regular rate for this case, and us Idaho residents are having to pay for it. Christian said, if I'm on the jury, we've already convicted and are relaxing at a local bistro with cocktails and prime steak. Malibu Surf says, not so conspiracy theorists love to be different, thinks it makes them sound smart. 100% agree with Ann Taylor. All you have to do is follow the money. Callie says, Julie, maybe we should hear from your brother. Oh, let's not call names, guys. Please don't do that. Don't do that, you guys. I want to say thank you to Kami for sharing a $1 super thanks. Thank you so much, Kami. I am putting that toward a editing equipment for this channel. I want to say thank you to Brother Mike for being a channel member for 14 months. Wow. Thank you so much, Brother Mike. I really am grateful for you being a channel member so long. And thank you to Brother Mike for the $1.99 super sticker. That is really kind of you. Thank you so much. Thank you to Edjas for a gifted reporter room membership. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you and if you got that membership, please make sure you say thank you to Edjas. And thank you to Hound Lover. He says, thank you for the $5 super sticker. He says, if Bryan Kohberger is the alternative suspect, that should tick off every veteran. As a disabled vet myself, Ann Taylor better have tight evidence, else it's defamation. Thank you for sharing this. And I agree. I feel like this guy who served his country honorably deserves better than to be dragged for clicks and views with absolutely no evidence. I just, it's really, really sad. And, I feel really, really badly for his family. I just can't even imagine how hard it would be to have a loved one be done away with in this manner. All right, so let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's alibi. Okay. So we're weeks away from jury selection, and we have not heard that this trial is being delayed. Moreover, we're hearing subpoenas are out. 5 new witnesses were subpoenaed. We also have heard that the Kohberger family, Bryan's father, Michael, his mother, Marianne, and both his sisters have been subpoenaed. So we don't know if this is from the defense or the prosecution. We don't know if the 5 that I mentioned earlier are from the defense or prosecution. I suspect that the 5 are for the defense, just because of the update that happened right around the time from the defense. Now, we're going to talk about whether or not Dylan went upstairs in just a moment, but let's talk about Bryan Kohberger and his alibi, because here we are, weeks away from the trial beginning, and we still don't have an alibi for Bryan Kohberger. And it appears that Ann Taylor wants to go through all of the evidence, and then, in my opinion, she wants to design an alibi that fits the prosecution's evidence, which is she has successfully delayed and gotten extensions on the alibi. So the purpose of providing an alibi is to prevent seating a jury and all the expense of a trial, only to find out that the person who did this was seen at the 7-Eleven. Now, Ann Taylor, there's been a lot of talk about fairness toward the defense, but very little talk about fairness toward the prosecution. After all, if Bryan Kohberger did this, then the public deserves to be protected. And as I shared with you in the WSU live stream that I did on the last live stream, it doesn't seem like big institutions really care about the safety of females. And I told you what I thought about WSU. Let's face it, an alibi that is presented after the defense has an opportunity to go through all of the prosecution evidence is going to be a lot more persuasive to a jury than an alibi of where he actually was. Now, Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger have been gifted 2 years of alibi delays by both the Latah County Judge, Judge John Judge, and the Ada County Judge, we call him Judge Hip, respectively. And let's consider the Alex Murdaugh trial and how the alibi hurt Alex Murdaugh when he said to law enforcement that he was not at the dog kennels that night where Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, his wife and son, were shot. And then the prosecution was able to produce a Snapchat video, and you could hear Alex Murdaugh's voice in the background, and that caught him in a bold-faced lie. Now, Alex Murdaugh had been at the dog kennels that night. That was exposed as a lie, and his alibi was a lie. So let's talk about our Idaho's rules of alibi, and is this being fair to the prosecution? So according to the state of Idaho, they have to notice of a defensive alibi at any time after arraignment and before a magistrate upon the complaint and upon written demand of the prosecuting attorney. The defense shall serve within 10 days or different time, as the court may direct, upon the prosecuting attorney a written notice of his intention to offer up a defense alibi. Such notice by the defense shall state on that the specific place or places where and we're going to talk about Dylan next, about where the defense claims to have been at the time of the offense, and the names and the addresses of the witnesses upon who he intends to rely on. This is, again, so we don't seat a jury, go through the expense of investigating and all of the hearings. This is all costing the taxpayers of Idaho, only to find out that the defendant has an alibi. So within 10 days after the receipt of the defendant's notice, but in no less than 10 days before the trial, unless the court otherwise directs, the prosecution attorney shall serve upon the defendant, his or her attorney, of a written notice stating the names and addresses of the witnesses upon whom the prosecution intends to rely on to establish the defense presence at the scene. Now, the prosecution can't even do this. They can't even do this because an alibi in Idaho has to be where you are at a specific time, the time of the crimes. And Ann Taylor just has him out driving around. The judge said that's not an alibi. So Ann Taylor was granted yet another extension. And I'm just like wondering, well, how many extensions does she get to have? And is this fair to the prosecution? A lot of questions about how fair things are for the defense team. I haven't heard a lot of questions about how fair things are for the prosecution. So I want to talk about Dylan next, whether or not she went upstairs and what she saw. Let me just check in with chat. I want to welcome Las Vegas Girl for being a channel member for 16 months. She says, love you, all the hard work you do, Jessica. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a channel member. And if you would like to become a channel member, it's next to the subscribe button. Subscribing is free. Channel member does cost a couple of dollars, but you get your name and it appears, let me just show you, it appears just like this, We're going to talk about Dylan next. We're not done. But the producer level looks like this with NJAWS, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Pepper, and Christy Valentine. And then the channel members look like this. So your name appears in all of my videos and my live streams. You also get a check mark. It's green to start, and then it turns red after 1 month, and then it turns blue for every month after that. And your name appears just like this in all of my live streams. So consider becoming a channel member, and we have our own channel member live streams that we do, usually 2 to 4 a month, depending on what's going on. We'll do like a question and answer session. So we're going to talk about Dylan next. So please stay with me, but I just do want to say thank you to all of our channel members for your support and your kindness. You guys are awesome. And let me also do super thanks and coffee gratitude from last live stream that we did. Thank you so much for that. So generous. And thank you for your gifted channel memberships. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And if I left you guys out or I left anybody off the list, please let me know. I am not perfect. All right, so let's talk about Dylan. What did Dylan see? Did she go upstairs? And, did she mistake Bryan Kohberger as a guest at the party house? Did Dylan, did she go upstairs to the 3rd floor? Did she see Kaylee and Maddie? So let's talk about Dylan. So in my opinion, her whole world has been turned upside down. She has been dragged for clicks and views. The same people that tell me that Bryan Kohberger is innocent will, even though she has not been charged with a single thing, will come into the comment section and say that she did it or Brent Kopaka did it with no evidence at all, not even being indicted, nothing. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Dylan. She was reportedly born in Boise, Idaho. She was raised by her father and stepmother until she graduated from high school. She was only 19 years old at the time of these crimes. And she had a good relationship with her family. And she did not come home on that fateful weekend that this happened, even though she lived close by. And that's because she had a formal evening on November 11th of 2022, a big senior day football game the following evening, which was followed with a few parties. And I told you guys that this weekend was a big party weekend, which is why I believe that page 118 is a hat tip to Elliot Rogers. So this is the iconic photo that Kaylee Gonzalez posted just hours before she was done away with. You can see Kaylee and Maddie and Ethan and Xana and roommates Bethany and Dylan. Now, according to the court records, following the football match, Dylan attended a party with Bethany before the duo returned back to the house around 2 a.m. Now, this was around the same time that Kaylee and Madison also came back. They had gone to the Corner Club bar. Then they had been walked down to the food truck by John Jack Showalter, also known as Hoodie Guy. And then they got into an Uber and went back to the house. Now, Xana and Ethan seem to already have been there. I'm not sure exactly what time they returned back and where all they went to. We do know that they went to a Sigma Chi party. Don't know if they went to any other parties, but we do know that Xana ordered DoorDash around 4 in the morning and that they were there. They would have probably passed Bryan Kohberger on the street. If he, again, he's innocent until proven guilty. Now, as per official documents, an intruder came into the 1122 King Road home through the second story kitchen patio doors before making his way to Maddie's and Kaylee's room. And I do think that he would have been really surprised to find Kaylee in the same bed with Maddie. I don't think he counted on that. And in my opinion, that is why the knife sheath was dropped and found underneath and to the side of Maddie. Some people believe that he left it as a calling card, that BK, Bryan Kohberger, left the K bar, KB knife as a calling card, and that this was going to be his signature. He wanted to be the K bar killer. Dylan also heard what sounded like cries, and we know she stepped out of her room multiple times. She froze when she saw the intruder. Some people have said, how did she freeze for 8 hours? it says she closed her door and locked it. She didn't freeze for 8 hours. She just froze. And I think how that came up, and remember, Dylan has never been allowed to say one word in her defense, but it came up because I think that, Dylan, law enforcement probably said, Dylan, how come the perpetrator didn't see you? How come you survived? And she goes, I don't know. I was just frozen in shock, in like a shock phase. I think that's all she said. Because we know she didn't stay frozen because she locked her door. And she, was upset that somebody was in the house, but didn't know that her roommates had all been done away with. She locked herself in her room. And we know that she ultimately went, after she was texting with Bethany and texting with her roommates, she ultimately did go down to Bethany's room. Now, she's an important eyewitness because, and again, how would, if law enforcement was just framing, if they were just framing Bryan Kohberger, how would they have gotten Dylan to describe a guy who's 5'10" or taller? And we know Bryan Kohberger is 6 feet tall, who's athletically built, but not muscular, who has bushy eyebrows. If they wanted to just frame him, why not just have her pick him out of a lineup? Why not just say, which one do you think did it? Something like that. But she didn't do that. And then she drew a balaclava mask. So this is Dylan with Maddie. And Dylan was the youngest roommate. She was only 19 at the time of the crimes. And in my opinion, she didn't want to call law enforcement because she was afraid. She was afraid. She had been drinking underage. And Steve Gonzalez said that he believes that there was some kind of an agreement in the house that the roommates had promised that before they called police, because they had so many, calls out. We've all seen the body cam footage of law enforcement showing up for these noise complaints, that, that they had made an agreement not to call law enforcement without talking to the over 21 roommates who were Kaylee and Maddie. And this would help explain why she was trying to get in touch with them. I don't think she thought they had been done away with. I just don't think she did. I don't think she was thinking clearly, though, because according to Dylan, she was drunkety drunk, and she had had over 10 drinks that night. It was a big party weekend. So Dylan is trying to move forward with her life, and it just seems like some people won't be happy until somebody, does something terrible to themselves out of desperation of being falsely accused. She survived. So whatever she did on that day by not confronting Bryan Kohberger, she survived. And if she had left that room and gone out and interacted with him, I don't think she would be here. Bethany survived. So whatever they did that they're still here, then they did the right thing. And I think she already has to live with enough survivor's guilt. I just don't think we need to pile it onto these two young survivors. The judge has already said they are victims. And if the judge says that they are victims, that is good enough for me, because he has seen more of the evidence than I have seen. Now, Dylan survived purely by chance. This could have easily been the Idaho 5 or the Idaho 6. And if Xana hadn't come out of her room, maybe it just would have been the Idaho 2. But if she had made a noise, if she had attempted to run away or challenge him or made any sudden movements and hadn't just frozen, and that's a really common thing that even animals do in the wild, when they see a predator, they freeze. It's just an instinct. So I think she did freeze for a second, and we know she didn't stay frozen for 8 hours because she locked the door. And I pointed out to you also that Jodi Arias, we know she did away with Travis Alexander. We know Jodi Arias did it. She's been found guilty. But he had roommates, and they were in the house with Travis for days, not hours, not 7 hours, days, with Travis Alexander lying on the floor in his bathroom. So I think she probably already carries a lot of survivor guilt. And I think that there's probably guilt that she and Bethany carry for not calling 911 sooner. And, her stepmother or former stepmother has, she has struggled a lot over the years. And I do think that this backlash from the public, where Dylan has been stuck under this gag order, not even able to defend herself, because she's stuck under a gag order that was requested by Ann Taylor and the defense team, a way overly expansive gag order, in my opinion. She can't even defend herself. And I think, her only crime is that she, in my opinion, is that she didn't call, and I don't think this is a crime, is that she didn't call law enforcement sooner. That's it. That's, and for that, people are like, want to destroy her life. And it's heartbreaking to see. It's heartbreaking to see what the roommates are having to go through while they can't even defend themselves. She can't even come out and give an interview to Dateline. Believe me, if she had wanted to do something, she could have easily have, snuck out statements to Dateline. We've never heard a source inside attributes this to the roommates. That's actually been from a credible source. So I don't know. And please don't mention other content creators in here. Just please don't do it. So no, she did not go upstairs. She did not go to the third floor. She did not see Kaylee and Maddie. Unless she testifies to something different from what we know so far, she did not go up to the third floor and see Kaylee and Maddie. Now, I believe Hunter might have seen something. And he told everybody to go back out, and maybe he made some kind of body language. We didn't hear him saying anything. So we're going to be having a hearing on June the 18th in Boise with Judge Hip, our favorite Ada County judge. And there is going to be a, quote, closed portion of the hearing where the judge is going to hear from Bryan Kohberger's attorneys. I think this is going to be evidence of a alternative perpetrator. What I'm trying to find out right now is if there's going to be any portion of the hearing that's open, and if so, what time. And as soon as I have that, I will post that, because I will for sure be airing that. I'm also planning to air the trial. So if you guys feel like Dylan is being unfairly dragged for clicks and views, put unfair in the comment section or in the top chat. If you think that dragging Dylan and Bethany is fair game, they were in the house, put a fair. So unfair if you think it's not right what's happened to Dylan and Bethany, and fair if you think it's fine and dandy to drag these two young women for clicks and views. Let me know what you think about all of this. I do want to hear about it. Legendary CEO says, I can't wait until time travel is discovered and these wrongs can be righted. Natalie says, doesn't BK have that visual snow thing? Maybe he didn't see her. That was a theory that I had too, Natalie, which is that I thought maybe she survived because of his. Now people have said, well, if he's visual snow, how did he drive his car? Well, visual snow can impair you with your central vision here. It can also be your periphery here, but it can also just be your periphery back here. So if he just had it on his periphery, he would still be able to see fine to walk around and drive, but maybe he wouldn't have caught her in his periphery. I think he was anxious to get out of the house, in my opinion. The perpetrator was at that point, which is why he didn't see Dylan. I think that he had done away with more people than he was planning. But, we also have this, horrible thing that was done to Ethan where his, legs were carved up. And I just don't think that Dylan and Bethany would do something like that. Super says, sorry, I just turned up. Can you please tell me in the chat why they didn't use the DNA? You'll have to back the chat up to the beginning. Now, for those of you that don't know, any live stream, you can back it up to the beginning because I opened with that. Malibu said, that's the last thing this girl expected. She didn't know what she was hearing. Hello, Milo. Glad you're here. Florence agrees with you. Jen says, who frames a dude who isn't in CODIS? Right. See, I always, this is why I love reading your comments. I threw out 18 things of why I thought, of if they were going to frame him, why didn't they do it this way? But yeah, why not pick somebody that was in CODIS that had that was in there? That would make it a lot easier. Great point. Common sense says, if Dylan was covering something up, she could have identified Bryan Kohberger when law enforcement showed his picture to her. Yeah, when they showed her the lineup, she could have said, that's the guy, if it was just all a frame job. Can I kick it? Says lots of drinks for a skinny young girl. Yeah, and she was only 19. She wasn't supposed to be drinking. For those of you that are not in the United States, The drinking age in the United States is 21 years old. It's not 18. So she was only 19. She was underage drinking. And she, could have gotten her older roommates into trouble if there was alcohol in that house. And it was a big party weekend. We know there was a party at that house the night before. Jules says, I agree. She stated the same story, but looking from a jury perspective, they will be asking the same questions. Natalie said Dylan is 5'10". Right. And I think that's why she said the perpetrator was 5'10" or taller. She knew she was 5'10". So she knew whoever she was looking at was around her height or a little bit taller. And Bryan Kohberger is 6 feet tall. Chrisanne says, I look forward to hearing more about the incriminating evidence against Kohberger, as evidence is still under the gag order. Definitely going to be binge watching the trial. Kelly said, I couldn't imagine the survivor's guilt that she must feel. I can't either. I feel like these roommates have been dragged. Christian said the house was party central. Not that it matters, but it will to the defense. I think you're right. Natalie said, so she can probably handle more alcohol. I don't know if she could handle 10 drinks very well. I mean, she was still standing up. I mean, Legend D said, are there any statistics available for the amount of times people are accused? Coups framing versus the quantity of people. I don't know what that says. If you could clarify that, I'm not sure. That was for Grok. Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing that. Common Sense says, I'm so glad they survived. Unfortunately, their lives are forever altered and not in a positive way. Jen says, in 1978, the Chi Omega attacks, she's talking about what Ted Bundy did, attacked 4 strangers, took less than 15 minutes. Eyewitnesses saw him leave. Multiple sorority sisters slept through that. One slept through, dropped out, and 1 year later did away with herself. That's heartbreaking. Yeah, survivor's guilt is real, you guys. And we do have a Facebook group if you want to come talk about it. Just type in Bryan Kohberger and reporter room and it should pop up. Natalie says, also Dylan said she watches true crime shows at night. So also why she was afraid. And I think alcohol would it would impair your judgment. Like whatever you guys want to say about the roommates, they called it in sooner than Travis Alexander's roommates, who never called it in. It was Travis Alexander's friends who stopped by to pick him up. Elizabeth Smart was taken from her own bedroom and her sister was in her room that night and her sister didn't tell anybody. So people react in different ways. Betsy said the brain shuts down to protect itself during trauma, part of the fight or flight. Las Vegas girl said, no, they won't, because it will explain around, because of the fact that that's what happens with trauma. And Brother Mike is just asking mods to help with the chat. And please give this a thumbs up. Let YouTube know I'm doing a G-rated show. And if you want me to continue to cover this case, please give this a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave me a comment letting me know you would like me to continue covering this case. Destiny said, I don't think he saw her. I really don't. Thank you for sharing that. Duckman says, what's on page 118? So let's pull that up really quick. That's such a good question. This is all right. I'm just waiting for it to, it's thinking. There it goes. Okay, let's try one more time. Okay, so this is the Elliot Rogers manifesto titled My Twisted World. Oop. And we know that from the affidavit at page 118, that there was an underline, and I believe that is this. This is what I believe it is. And he talks about, he says terrible things about women. I do think that this was an incel crime. But he talks about his day of retribution. Now, this isn't the day that he committed his crimes. This is his manifesto talking about We do know that there's a page 118 and that it is underlined, but he said it came to a point where I had to set a date for the day of retribution. I originally considered doing it on Halloween of 2013. That is when the entire town erupts in raucous party, and they would literally be thousands of people crowded together who I could do away with, I'm watching my words, with ease. And the goal was to do away with people in Isla Vista, to utterly destroy that wretched town. But after seeing the footage of previous Halloween events on YouTube, I saw that there were many cops walking around. It would be too risky. One gunshot from a cop would end everything. The day of retribution would have to be a normal party weekend. And this was a party weekend, you guys. This November, that weekend was a big party weekend. I just shared with you why it was such a big party weekend. So it'd have to be a normal party weekend. And so I set it for some time during November of 2013. Now, I've shared with you in the past that I believe that this is going to be, I don't know for sure, so speculation alert here, but I think that this is going to be the underlined page. And I think that the November 13th date was selected by the perpetrator as a nod or a hat tip to Elliot Rogers, and that he couldn't go back in a time machine to 2013. So he picked November 13th of 2022, and that November of 2013, and that this was also a huge party weekend. So I hope I've answered your question. I believe let me see what else we have. And I'm going to be talking about, okay, look, we're doing the poll. Let me go through that and see where you guys are at. If you guys think it's unfair about what the roommates are being put through. Unfair. Okay, so lots of unfairs. Hey, Barbara. She agrees. Dissociative disorder, don't see what you're seeing. And Jazz is asking to please be respectful. Francine says unfair. Jody says unfair. Jules says unfair. Christine says poor Hunter, so traumatized from all of this. Yeah, and the roommates too. Betsy says no one went upstairs. Hunter stopped them after looking into Xana's room. Get out, get out. He didn't let them see anymore, and they called police. Crafty One says unfair. M. Barbarossa says unfair. Amber, unfair. Tammy, unfair. Christy, thank you so much for modding today. Unfair. April, unfair. And Jazz says unfair. Thank you for modding today, and Jazz. Unfair from Kat. Unfair from Destiny. Claire, Hound Liver. Okay, so I see a lot of unfairs. Wow. Thank you for modding today, Kami. Marco says, I don't agree to her reaction totally, but I still see her as a victim. Yeah, and I think looking at what the judge has said, and the judge has told us that he believes that Dylan is a victim. I think if the judge believes that Dylan and Bethany are victims, that he's seen a lot more evidence than what we've seen, right? So he would know. He would know. So thank you guys for your compassion and empathy for Dylan and Bethany. DM, thank you for modding today. Unfair. Thank you for modding today, Barbara. Donna says unfair. Thank you for modding today. Kohberger, I don't know what that is. Unfair. Okay, so lots of unfairs. Barker says, I'm still waiting to the end till her testimony. It's the only way. Pert says totally unfair. Unfair. I guess what I'm asking is this unfair? Is it fair to drag somebody, fair or unfair, to drag somebody for clicks and views who's never been indicted or charged with a crime in this case, that no medication proof has been shown? Patty says, so he was able to stargaze with snow vision. Visual snow, I think is what you're saying. Yeah, that's a great point too. This is why I love reading your comments. BK has white noise though. Visual snow. Christina says unfair. Christine says unfair. Thank you for modding today, Christine. Jordan says, I don't think he saw her. And Jazz is asking people to give a thumbs up. Christian said, no legitimate source blames these two. Thank you so much, Christian. Claire says, I think he self-diagnosed himself with visual snow. Who knows if he even had it. Yeah, he could have just been trying to figure out what was wrong with him. Because he was talking about seeing his dad as a good man, but not feeling anything for him and viewing himself as a sack of meat and this is really alarming, other people as sacks of meat. Rhonda says, unfair. I've experienced in frozen shock at age 17. I know what happens. Barbara thinks that they are victims and survivors. And Jen says, I wonder how the judicial system could have protected these girls better through this. Yeah, I agree. I think just not mentioning anything about what she saw, if there was, going to be a gag order, not bringing them up at all, which they did try to do at the outset by just simply saying both roommates were on the ground floor. They did try to not bring them in, but then they put out a statement attributing it to Dylan. And then, and then with the gag order, which I just think was just absolutely insane. The fact that it included the victims' loved ones was crazy. Kathy said, I think he accomplished more than he wanted to. And Dion says, how could he drive his car across the country? Well, that's a great question, Dion. So I think, it depends if he really did have visual snow. This is what he was saying because he was on the TapaTalks. But the visual snow can be your periphery, which can be back here. It can be right here. And it can be, your central vision. Let me pull that up really quick, just to show you what is she talking about. I'm just trying to get past. Okay, this is a good one. Just so. Let me take this down, put this up. Okay, so this is such a great question. Thank you for that. So this is the periphery, and you can see the central vision, the center of vision, and then you have the near periphery, the mid periphery, and the far periphery. So if he had visual snow here in the far periphery or even the mid, he would still be able to drive and see fine. He would be absolutely fine to do that. If it was in the center of his vision, then his vision would probably be impaired in some way. So I suspect if he did have visual snow, I don't know, but it would have been in the mid or far peripheral vision. So I hope I've answered that question. And Enjaz just gifted another reporter room membership. Thank you so much, Enjaz. That's one of the nice things of coming into the top chat to talk to me. Thank you for that, Enjaz. Macro says, I have to check what his personal library is. Sophia says, people keep bringing up the symptoms he said he had when he was a teen. Yeah, because visual snow doesn't go away. And people are wondering how he saw it at night. Well, I hope I've answered that question. Natalie says, I may be misremembering, but I thought Brie was a vegan because he thinks it helps with visual snow. Well, that's been a theory that's been purported, that the reason he was vegan is not because of some type of ethical issue, which makes sense, right? Because the K-bar knife that he purchased, and whether you think he committed this crime or not, he did purchase a K-bar knife from Amazon, and the knife sheath that he chose, the knife sheath is leather, and somebody that was truly vegan would not have purchased something that was leather. Jen says, before the trial, please try to view the Garrett discovery explanation of the tower's range. It's critical to understand so you aren't duped at the trial. Well, I have been through the Garrett discovery. Donna says, prayers for the victims, justice may be served. In fact, I've shared some of the Shadow Dragon confirmed Garrett stuff. But I'm not going to put forth a conspiracy theory to my viewers. I could have said there were tunnels under the house. I would probably have 100,000 subscribers if I would have gone off onto conspiracy theories. But I just don't feel like that's fair to Bryan Kohberger. I don't feel like it's fair to Dylan. I don't feel like it's fair to Bethany. And, I'm just going to keep going with what I can live with. And what I can't live with is lying to my viewers to get some clicks and views. Malibu says he's just wired wrong. Some are just born that way. Christian said, put the thumbs up. Kids are gracious and attractive. Host can hit 50K. Thank you so much, Christian. That's really nice of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thomas says, I'm truly honored. Can I kick it? Said, I'm wondering if the alternative suspect is Kohberger, who else was brought up originally in an investigation. You're talking about Jack Decor and John Jack Showalter. They were both brought up, and a lot of people were like wondering if it was Jack Decor, but this is what Steve Gonzalez told us. Jack Decor has been cleared by law enforcement. They did work from the inside out, and Jack Decor was cleared, and that it's because his cell phone was moving around inside his home at the time of the crimes. So yeah, there's no evidence, and there's no tunnels under the house, you guys. Yeah, that was like, and then it was the green Hyundai Elantra, and then when I pointed out what Regina said, which is the Hyundai Elantra doesn't come in green, then I was told the car was wrapped, and then when that didn't fly, I was then told that now the car is silver. Sophia says he's on the spectrum. That obviously doesn't justify his evil side. Well, yeah, people with autism or who are autistic are no more likely to commit a crime like this than people who are not autistic. So I just want to put that out there. Now, is it possible that he's autistic and also has some level of or some form of psychopathy with that? Yes, it's possible. Marcus says they are saying that the state cannot produce receipts and don't want to. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Thank you, Brother Mike. Malibu says, very striking hearing the girls' voices on the 911 call. You can hear how young and terrified they are. Yeah. Yeah, please don't mention other content creators. You will be removed from the chat. I don't want to drag anybody else, and I don't want to promote anybody else in my thing. If you're here, I'm going to just assume that, just mods, if you see anybody dragging another YouTube, I don't want to delve into the drama channel spectrum. Please just remove the comment and time them out. Callie said, you are speaking my language. If he was born this way, he would have had issues when he was growing up. However, I think his issues came later, possibly nature and nurture. And per Anderson, thank you, Jessica, for being true. This world is full of conspiracy theories. Please subscribe. Thank you so much, Per Anderson. I really appreciate it. Well, guys, I am going over right now to do a live stream on the missing Sullivan children, Jack and Lily Sullivan. And I also have a summer wells update that I'm going to share in that live stream. So if you want to join me, just follow me over there. And if you haven't subscribed, please. And thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.